People like to imagine the Vatican at night as quiet. It isn't. Even after the tour groups and pilgrims are gone, there are always footsteps somewhere, guards on rotation, cleaning staff, priests who can't sleep, walking and praying their rosaries down empty halls. The city outside never really goes silent either. Scooters buzz, sirens wail, drunk tourists sing off-key in Trastevere. But there is a kind of quiet you only hear in a few corners of the place. The ones not on any map. Those are my corridors. My name isn't important. My badge just says Consultor Laico, under the seal of a dicastery that officially concerns itself with doctrine. In practice, my unit deals with everything that happens when doctrine bleeds into phenomena. Apparitions, objects that shouldn't exist, infestations that don't fit the handbook. The Church has a new set of norms and a polished public language to talk about alleged supernatural occurrences. Behind that, it has people like me. There is one protocol we almost never talk about, even among ourselves. I read it only once, in a secure room under St. Peter's, under the eye of a cardinal who watched my face the whole time. He slid the folder across the table like it was something poisonous. On the cover, in red ink and Latin that didn't bother to sound polite, was a simple title, De Visitatoris Centenari, about the centenary visitor. The document inside was old, updated many times, bending under the weight of centuries of annotations. It described a pattern, recognized long ago, but never preached about, that every 100 years, give or take a year or two by our calendars, the same entity manifested on Vatican soil and requested audience under a banner of truce. Not a demon, not one of many, the same one. The wording was blunt about that. Whatever name it had in older tongues, the file just called it the visitant. The bargain, according to the document, was this. Once in a century, the gates would open a finger's width from the other side. The visitant would be permitted to cross into a specifically prepared chamber under heavy constraint. For a limited span of hours, it could speak, observe, and submit requests. In return, it was bound not to harm any soul or claim any right outside that room. Why did the Church ever agree to that? The oldest pages were vague. Maybe those who wrote them assumed anyone cleared to read would already know the stories. Maybe they were afraid to put them on paper. There were hints. A siege that lifted unexpectedly. A plague that stopped at one city's walls. A schism that never happened. Deals, in other words. What mattered for me, reading it all those centuries later, was the end. The visitant may come once in each 100 years, during a window of 10 nights, reckoned from the first manifestation recorded. It must give a sign before crossing. When the sign appears, the chamber must be prepared, and 3 officials of specified rank must be present. No one may attempt to destroy, detain, or bind the visitant beyond the agreed limits unless and until it violates the pact. Someone had underlined that last clause hard enough to tear the page. When I finished reading, the cardinal took the file, locked it away again, and said, "You understand why this is only legend for most of the clergy. I understand that if this ever happens in my lifetime, I'd prefer to be on duty than on vacation," I answered. He smiled thinly. "Pray it waits for the next century, figlio mio." That was 5 years ago. According to the chronology, the last visit was in 1927. Close enough, people said back then, to the 100 from the one before in 1828. There had been signs. A star that refused to move from one corner of the sky for 3 nights. Bells that rang without ropes. Old men had gone pale. Convocations had been held behind closed doors. By our math, the next window wouldn't open until 2027. The night it came early, my shift started like any other. It was February. Cold. The kind that seeps through stone and into your bones. I checked in at the Swiss guard post with a nod badged through an unmarked door, and let the familiar maze of staff corridors swallow me. My route took me past potted plants someone had tried their best to keep alive under fluorescent lights, past walls lined with framed photographs of popes shaking hands with presidents, past doors that opened on offices piled with dusty files. My unit's operations room sits behind a door that looks like a broom closet. Inside, the air smells of coffee and old incense. There are monitors, a crucifix, a safe with reinforced internal shielding, and 3 desks. Only one other chair was occupied when I walked in. "Buonasera," said Elena without looking up from her screen. She's been in longer than me. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, a mouth that only smiles after everything is double-checked. She wore the same plain dark clothes as I did, the kind that let you pass for security, assistant, or nothing at all depending where you walked. "What are we babysitting tonight?" I asked, hanging my coat, clipping on my ID on its retractable cord. "Elusive pigeons, mostly," she said. "One report of weeping from a side chapel. Security already found a kid with a bottle of olive oil. One nun thinks the statue in her convent blinks more than it should. And," she tapped a key, "scheduled audit of the lower rotunda seals." I groaned. "Again?" "Maintenance switched out some of the lighting," she said. "Any change in temperature or humidity, they make us walk the whole ring and check nothing decided to wake up." The lower rotunda is not as romantic as it sounds. It's a circular corridor 2 levels down, hugging the old foundations, walled with doors that lead to small vaults. Places where things are stored that can't be thrown away and can't be displayed. Most of them are just inconvenient, dubious relics that attract too much attention, objects from condemned private cults, statues that make people see things at night. A few are worse. "Fine," I said. "I'll walk the ring. You take the nun and her blink-happy statue. We'll swap when I get back." We checked out the keys. Each one is coded, not just to a lock, but to the presence of a specific operator. We clipped radios to our belts, tested them. "Channel 3, Elena said. "If anything feels off, you call it in. No heroics, no improvisation. We aren't in the movies." "We're worse," I said. "We're in Rome." She rolled her eyes and shooed me toward the inner door. The descent to the rotunda is by stair, not elevator. Security by inconvenience. Fewer people stumble into places like that by accident if they have to walk down uninviting stone steps under flickering bulbs. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. Even the hum of the city muted. The air cooled, but it was a dry, even cold this far under rock. At the bottom, a reinforced door waited. I slid my card, turned my key, placed my palm on the reader. The lock thunked with a weight you feel in your teeth more than your ears. The rotunda lights came up in a soft, dim ring as I stepped through. The corridor is a perfect circle, maybe 20 meters across, arched ceiling low, walls pierced at intervals by metal doors. Numbers, no labels. You don't want descriptive plaques on things like these. Audit is a ritual. You walk clockwise, reading each door's status on your handheld, checking seals by eye, noting any trace of tampering or seepage. Most nights, it's boring. Boring is the point. Door 1, secure. Door 2, secure. At door 5, my handheld flickered. For a second, the display went black, then filled with gibberish characters before writing itself. I frowned, tapped the casing. Static. "Control, this is Rossi in the rotunda," I said into the radio. "I'm getting interference on my handheld. You picking up anything topside?" Elena's voice crackled back, faint under a layer of fuzz. "Nothing. Clean. You're breaking." I turned in a slow circle. The overhead lights were steady. No visible anomalies. Just a slight pressure in the air. A familiar tightening behind my sternum. I'd felt it before in other places. Basements, old chapels, hospital rooms where things refused to die. the sensation of something pressing from the other side of a wall that isn't really a wall. "Say again?" I asked. "Aussie? Repeat." I took the radio from my belt, checked the channel. 3, as agreed. Signal strength full, according to the little bars. The interference wasn't technical. The pressure spiked. For a heartbeat, it felt like the whole corridor inhaled at once. My ears popped. The hair on my arms stood up. Then the lights went out. Total, immediate black. No humming fade, no flicker. Just a click in the bones and the sense of being dropped into a well. My hand went to the flashlight on my harness by reflex. Thumb found the switch. A narrow beam knifed out, harsh against the sudden dark. I swept it around. Bare rock. Doors. And then I saw the chalk. It hadn't been there moments before. At the very center of the floor, the exact geometric heart of the circular corridor, someone had drawn a circle in white. Perfectly round, perfectly even, as if cut by a compass. Around its edge, symbols curled and knotted, older than Latin, older than anything I'd ever had to memorize. In the center of the circle sat a chair that hadn't been there seconds before either. Simple, wooden, the kind you'd see in a sacristy. On the chair, a figure. My brain tried to make it a man at first. It's easier that way. Male frame, yes. Clothes like a black suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. Hands resting calmly on the arms of the chair. Ankles crossed. The face, I didn't want to look at the face. I did anyway. It was slippery. Your eyes want to fix on features, catalog them. Dark hair, pale skin, eyes some color. Mine wouldn't. Each time my gaze tried to pin one detail, it shifted a fraction, not like it was changing, but like I was. What didn't change was the feeling that every part of the room was watching me through that almost face. I knew, in the way you know when you step off a curb and only then see the bus, exactly what I was looking at. "Too early," I said softly. It sounded stupid in the dark. "You're not supposed to be here for another 2 years. The figure smiled without quite moving its mouth. The lights overhead buzzed back to life, dimmer than before, but enough to paint everything in soft gold. The chalk circle gleamed on the stone like bone. "I was invited," it said. The voice had no accent you could place. It was clean, like a well-edited recording, every syllable perfectly shaped. "I didn't invite you," I said. "Not you," it replied. "Him." It tilted its head almost lazily toward one of the doors. Number 13, of course. Behind door 13, according to the index I'd memorized, was one of the older vaults. The notes were sparse, reserve of compacts. Items and documents related to long-standing spiritual agreements, not to be opened without triple authorization. A thin line of char ran from the bottom of door 13 to the edge of the chalk circle, as if something had burned its way along the floor. I stepped closer, just enough to see better without crossing any lines. My training screamed, "Do not break the circle. Do not interrupt the geometry. Do not stand where the other side wants you." The visitant, because that's what it had to be, watched me with patient interest. "There are always men who dislike waiting for their turn," it said. He was hungry or frightened. Those feel the same from where I stand. He knocked with the tools he had. I answered as far as I was permitted. "Who?" I asked, though I already had an idea. There are always a few in every age, clever, anxious, more loyal to their idea of the church than to anyone in it. "One of his titles would mean nothing to you," it said. A lesser man under a greater hat, worried that the world was slipping through his fingers. He thought he could fix it by accelerating the clock. My jaw clenched. Someone up the chain had tried to call in a favor early, to use the centenary ritual like a private hotline. That was bad enough. Worse was the realization that the entity had agreed. You are not supposed to be here without the chamber prepared, I said. Without the pact active. Without 3 witnesses of specified rank. It shrugged one shoulder delicately. And yet, here I am, on church ground, within a circle of constraint, summoned by one of your own. The pact is not broken. It is stretched. The chamber is on the next level down, I said, more to myself than to it. The official one, with its carved constraints, relic inset walls, backup systems, everything we could bring to bear to keep such a thing pinned to rules. Not this place. Not a storage ring with chalk on the floor. It followed my gaze around the corridor, amused. You built a room for me, it said. You carved it out, blessed it, argued in councils about the exact geometry. I was touched. The chuckle that followed made the lights dim for a second. But I became curious, it went on. What would happen if someone opened a side door early? What I could do before your ritual wrapped me up? Curiosity is a sin, you tell your children. Why then did yours act on it so eagerly? Because we're stupid, I said. It smiled again. This time I made myself memorize one detail. A small notch at the corner of its mouth, like a scar that had healed badly. Something human to anchor my mind so it didn't float. Some, it agreed. Not all. That is why I came to speak to you, Daniel. I didn't flinch at my name. Names are the first things like this try to use. I'd trained that reflex out of myself years ago. You shouldn't, I said. If this room isn't activated under the pact, you are subject to all the usual rules. Am I? It asked. The circle under its chair glowed faintly. Not bright enough to cast light, just enough to say, something is current here, whether you blessed it or not. I took a careful breath. My radio was dead weight on my belt. My phone, in my pocket, might as well have been a stone. Whatever field the visitant carried with it was clogging everything that spoke in waves. No backup was coming until someone noticed I was overdue on the audit. That could be 10 minutes. It could be an hour. Down here, with signal choking, it could be never. Why me? I asked, honestly wanting to know. There were canons, theologians, exorcists far above my pay grade in this place. Men with Latin in their marrow and authority in their signatures. I was a layman with a clearance badge and too many bad nights behind his eyes. Because you read my file instead of just its cover, it said. Because you did not close it and mutter a prayer and pretend it was myth. Because when your superior asked if you were afraid, you told the truth. The memory surfaced. That interview in the secure room, the cardinal's eyes, my answer. I prefer to know what's coming. And, it added, because you are on duty. The last time it had come, if the records were right, there had been weeks of preparation, debates, fastings, selected officials chosen and cleansed. Now it was just me and a thing older than any building above us, sitting on a sacristy chair in a chalk circle drawn by a coward. What do you want? I asked. There is no point in pretending you don't care. Curiosity cuts both ways. It glanced at door 13 again. There is a document in there, it said. A small thing, 4 pages, written 400 years ago by a man who thought he could trap me in a clause. Your superior, the one who knocked, wished to renegotiate that clause. He died before he could open the vault. His heart was not designed for the conversation. A cold prickle crawled down my spine. Men in certain offices did, sometimes, die in their chairs. Sometimes it made the news. Sometimes it didn't. You want the paper? I said. I want to demonstrate that your bargains are only as strong as the hands that hold them, it said. I want to show you what I do, to those who try to be clever on their own. I want, for once, to have my 100-year conversation without everyone pretending they don't enjoy the drama. You're out of schedule, I said. You don't get to dictate terms. It laughed softly. Listen to yourself. You think time means the same thing to both of us. The lights buzzed again. One of the doors down the corridor rattled, as if something behind it had shifted closer. I forced my attention back to the circle. Here's the thing they never put in the public prayers. Demons aren't omnipotent. They're bound by rules as tight as ours, just skew. They push where there's give. They slip through where our structures have hairline cracks. But inside a properly laid circle, under a properly invoked authority, they are as constrained as animals in a cage. This wasn't a properly laid circle, but it was still a circle. It still had symbols. And this place, for all its neglect, sat under layers of consecrated stone and a very old dome. It was not invincible. Neither was I. But the scales weren't as far from balanced as it wanted me to think. I'm not authorized to alter any agreements, I said. I'm here for containment, not negotiation. That is why you interest me, it said. You are not trying to get anything from me. You are trying to keep what you already have. Territory, souls, your very small, very stubborn sense of order. It uncrossed its ankles, leaned forward slightly. The chalk under the chair brightened. So I will offer you something, man of no hat. Don't, I said automatically. It went on as if I hadn't spoken. I will sit here. I will not move. I will not leave this circle. I will not speak another word to anyone else in this rotunda. In return, you will open that door, take the document, and bring it to the chamber that was built for me. When the time is right, whenever your superiors finally recover from their inconvenient mortality, we will conduct our visit as your books require. You will have restored order. You will have kept your schedules, and I will have my page. That was the hook. Not power, not glory. Normalcy. The chance to shove this intrusion into the correct box again, to tell myself and everyone else that the rules still worked. Or, it added lightly, you can refuse and I can see how many of these other doors I can open before your friends find their way down the stairs. Something heavy thumped behind door 7. The metal bowed inward a millimeter. Dust sifted from the ceiling. I had a choice. Not the metaphysical kind, the immediate physical kind. Compliance. Give it what it wanted, keep it apparently caged. Pray that moving one piece of paper from one vault to another didn't unbalance whatever fragile legal spiritual ecosystem older men than me had built. Defiance. Refuse. Gamble that the circle and the relics embedded in the walls would hold long enough for me to run, shout, ring every alarm, summon enough authority to smother this thing back into wherever it had seeped from. If I was alone in a forest with it, maybe the answer would have been different. But I was standing under the heart of the church, above bones and faith, and millions of people who believed this hill meant safety. You don't bargain on their behalf because you want your paperwork to look tidy. Here's my counteroffer, I said. Its eyebrows ticked up in faint amusement. You think you are in a position to bargain? No, I said. I think I'm in a position to annoy you. I took a slow step backward until my heel touched the outer rim of the chalk circle, not crossing it, not scuffing it, just aligning myself directly across from it. Then I began to recite, not a negotiation formula, not the careful, polite Latin of centuries of Pax, something older in our own lineup, a denial, a refusal of rights, clause by clause, pouring authority from above through my brittle, exhausted human throat. The visitant listened, head tilted, like a man at a play he's seen before, performed by a lesser troupe. The words gathered weight as they left my mouth. The air thickened. The symbols at the edge of the chalk circle writhed briefly, like worms in salt. I deny you claim, I said, in this place, over these souls, under this name. When you say that in an empty room, it feels like shouting into a well. When you say it in front of something that has slept under 100 bargains, you feel the collision. The visitant's almost face flickered. For a moment, I saw something beneath the human camouflage, a structure that wasn't bone, an arrangement of angles that didn't make sense in 3 dimensions. My vision blurred around it. My stomach lurched. "Careful," it said softly. "Your flesh was not made to see that. Your schedule," I managed between phrases, "is in violation. You came unannounced. You were not summoned by the proper authority. That frees me from obligation." It smiled, slow and very sincere. "Now you are just making yourself feel better." Dr. Seven bulged again. A long, grinding sound echoed through the corridor, as if something with too many joints were stretching for the first time in a century. A whisper, a real one with sound and breath, slid along the stone. "Cold, it's so cold." One voice? Many? Hard to tell. Sweat ran down my back under my shirt despite the chill. I kept going. You don't stop halfway through an act of denial. If you do, it's worse than never starting. Around us, the air began to vibrate. Fine dust lifted off the stones and hung in a slow, shimmering dance. My teeth hurt from the pitch. The visitant's gaze sharpened. "This is not wise," it said. "Still calm, always calm. If you press, you will wake more than me. Do you think your saints will thank you for loosening all the chains at once?" "I think," I said, "that you're bluffing." I didn't, not really. But sometimes you have to speak bravery into existence. I reached the last line of the formula and spat it like a curse. The world seemed to pause. Then the chalk circle flared. This time with real light, white and fierce, shooting up in a thin column around the chair. The symbols writhed, then locked into a new configuration. The stone under the visitant's feet smoked faintly. It hissed, actually hissed. Not like a snake, more like steam forced through a narrow valve. "You presume," it said. There was no amusement now, no easy superiority. Cold fury edged every syllable. "You lit the trap without priming the bait. Do you know what that does to the balance?" "No," I said. "But I know it keeps you from taking even one more step." The column of light tightened. The chair creaked under strain. The visitant gripped its arms, fingers ghost pale on the wood. For a moment, I let myself feel something like hope. Then door 13 blew inward. Not open. Inward. The hinges ripped out of stone. The lock assembly twisted like tin. A wave of air slammed into my chest, hot and bitter, carrying the stink of old ink, dried blood, and something else. A tang like burned feathers. The chalk circle held. The light held. The visitant did not move. Whatever was behind door 13 did. Papers vorticed out of the darkness. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, swirling like a flock of albino bats. They plastered themselves to the walls, the ceiling, the other doors, each page stamped with seals I didn't want to read too closely. Words crawled and rearranged themselves on them, in languages my eyes refused to track. At the center of the shattered doorway, something glowed red gold. Not bright. Banked, like coals under ash. The visitant's eyes, whatever color they'd been pretending to be, reflected that glow. "You have opinions about my timing," it said, tone suddenly flat. "You should pay more attention to your own." The thing in the vault was not a demon. Not exactly. It was the aggregate of promises. All the little and large bargains men in lace and men in rags had scribbled, signed, sealed, then hidden. The file had called them compacts. I'd always imagined dusty scrolls. I hadn't realized compacts could acclimate. The glow pulsed. Every sheet of paper shivered like a leaf in a storm. For a terrifying second, I thought the light around the circle would flicker, and all of it, the visitant, the swarming contracts, the old whispers, would wash over me in one tide. Then something else moved, from the stone above us, behind us, in us. I've spent my career trying to keep my mind open enough to recognize the supernatural without snapping. You handle cursed relics. You have to believe they're cursed for the prayers to bite. You walk into a room full of cold spots and whispers. You have to accept there's more than bad insulation. That night in the rotunda, faith as I'd known it pushed back. A pressure from above, not like the visitants from the side. Heavy, sober, vast in a different way. Not older than the world, tied to it, layered into it, shaped by centuries of people pointing in the same direction and saying there. The papers froze mid-flight. The glow in the vault steadied, then dimmed, as if someone had put a hand over it. The visitant squeezed its eyes shut and bared its teeth. For the first time, it looked strained. Too many witnesses, it muttered, even when they are asleep. I realized, with a lurch, what it meant. Above our heads, chapels, dormitories, hotel rooms, cheap hostels, people, pilgrims, priests, nuns, tourists. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them, stacked in layers, breathing the same cold night air. Some praying, some dreaming, some cursing their alarm clocks. Belief is a network. Tonight it pulsed. Unaware, unfocused, but massive. Maybe my act of denial had been stupid. Maybe it had also been a flare, drawing attention. Not from the thing in front of me, but from whatever passes for order on this side. The visitant looked at me, eyes bright with a new, sharper anger. "You have cost me a conversation," it said. "We will have to cram a century into a decade now. Or less." "Good," I said hoarsely. "Maybe we'll be better prepared next time." "You won't," it said. "You never are. That is why this is so entertaining." The light around its circle shifted hue, from white to something harsher, shot through with lines of gold. The chalk symbols seared into the stone and blackened. The chair's legs fused to the floor. The visitant's shape blurred at the edges, not dissolving, but receding, like something sinking into water. "This was not an official visit," it said, "so I am not bound to keep it out of the minutes. When we next speak in your pretty room, Daniel, remember that you chose to light the trap before you understood how many beasts it held." Then it was gone. One moment, a figure in a chair. The next, an empty circle of scorched stone and a wooden frame charred black. The lights snapped back to their full, normal brightness. Every sheet of paper fell at once. They drifted down like snow, covering floor and vaults. The red-gold glow in door 13 winked out, leaving only darkness and a smell like doused candles. My legs remembered they were supposed to hold me up. They did an average job. I staggered to the nearest wall and let my shoulder take the rest of my weight. The radio on my belt screeched to life. "See, Daniel, answer me!" Elena's voice sharp with panic. "Where the hell are you? We lost you for 6 minutes." 6 minutes. I looked at my watch. It said 43. Sweat cooled on my skin. "In the rotunda," I croaked. "Lower level. Do not come down alone. Bring everyone." "What happened?" "Protocol breach," I said, which was one way to put it. "And containment. Mostly." There were inquiries, of course. By the time the first team reached me, I'd pulled myself together enough to look like someone who'd merely survived a minor explosion. We did the immediate triage, checked the vaults for breaches. Only door 13 was damaged. The others had bowed, rattled, gone cold, but held. The papers were collected, counted, sorted under more eyes than I'd ever seen in one room. Some were simply burned, under orders older than any of us. Others were resealed, this time with more thorough protections. No one spoke the visitant's name out loud. Officially, it hadn't been here. In the days that followed, I gave my statement 3 times, once to my direct superior, once to a panel of 3 in black, and once in a small, dim chapel with a confessor who didn't flinch when I said the words I denied a centenary pact before its hour. The cardinal from the file was not at any of those meetings. He'd died, quietly and officially, in his sleep a month before. Some part of me wondered if he'd been the one to knock early, or if he'd tried to stop whoever had. In the end, the conclusion they wrote down was suitably vague. Anomalous manifestation in the lower rotunda. Possible prefigurement of scheduled event. Corrective measures applied. Vigilance to be increased. They did not write someone attempted to cheat at a game older than our institution, and one of our janitors in plain clothes slammed the board hard enough to knock pieces off both sides. That part stays in stories like this. Weeks later, alone again in the operations room in the middle of a dull shift, reports of faces in windows, a rumor about a bleeding painting in Brazil, a schedule of upcoming shrine audits. I pulled the Visitatoris Centenarii file from the secure cabinet and opened it. There, in a new hand at the back, was an added note. It did not mention my name. It didn't have to. In the year of our Lord 2025, an irregular approach of the visitant occurred before the opening of the calculated window. The manifestation was constrained and recalled. It is to be expected that the next formal visit will occur not according to prior reckoning, but at a time of the entity's choosing within the established century. In the margin, someone had written, small and almost apologetic, "We must assume the schedule has been advanced." I closed the file, locked it away, and leaned back in my chair. Outside, bells rang the hour. Somewhere up in St. Peter's, tourists were pointing phones at ceilings that had seen more than their owners ever would. Swiss guards yawned. Priests hurried from one meeting to another. A nun in a convent kitchen stirred soup and muttered to herself about the heat. Life went on over the stone I'd stood on while something old tested our doors. Every 100 years, they say, a demon visits the Vatican. This time, it came 2 years early. It left earlier, too, dragged halfway back by a web of belief it hadn't fully accounted for, and a bureaucrat who was too stubborn to let it set its own hours. Somewhere underfoot, under layers of stone and paper and words, the next move is already being prepared. Next time it comes, there will be the chamber, the 3 officials, the precise liturgy. Maybe I'll be there. Maybe I'll be dead. Maybe the whole world will be too busy burning in other ways to notice a quiet conversation under an old dome. What I know is this. When it stepped into our house before its appointment, it found someone home. I told it no, and for a moment, in a corridor no tourist will ever see, that was enough.